Cut by Wolfgang Puck is one of New York City's most elevated steakhouses. The restaurant features a menu filled with premium steaks and luxurious dishes from A5 Japanese wagyu to seafood towers. To put it simply, I just had to give Cut a try.
Today I'm here in New York City, right along the Hudson River, and it is a beautiful, unseasonably warm spring day. It's also my birthday, and as I've said before, I am not a fan of birthdays. Still, getting older is truly a blessing, and to celebrate my birthday, I always at least like having a good restaurant to go to. This year, I made a reservation at the Michelin-starred One White Street, but unfortunately, I got a call about an hour ago that my reservation was canceled. Unfortunately, it seems like the restaurant is having some electrical issues and thus can't open for service. I am pretty bummed. I made that reservation about 3 weeks ago and I was really looking forward to this dinner. And this week for me has frankly sucked. I found out quite suddenly that I'd pretty much have to move out of my apartment. I've been lugging my stuff into a storage unit the past few days and it's been so stressful. Apartment hunting in New York City when you don't have a very big budget is not fun. So yeah, I was really looking forward to this dinner in an otherwise pretty crappy week. But things happen and things could always be worse. The problem is it's pretty tough to make a reservation at a Michelin-starred restaurant or some of the top fine dining places in the city on a Saturday night at short notice. I was just getting more and more stressed. All the places I looked up had no tables available or didn't take reservations for single diners, and yeah, it wasn't good. Thankfully, I did see Cut by Wolfgang Puck, a fine steakhouse, had tables open, so I made a reservation and I'll have steak tonight, so yeah, that's not bad. It's not what I wanted, but it's steak. I am still pretty happy. So with that being said, let's eat some beef and go to Cut.
New York City's location of Cut is situated in the financial district. Throughout the world, there are a handful of Cut restaurants in cities such as Las Vegas and London. In fact, the Singapore outpost of Cut, housed inside the iconic Marina Bay Sands, even has a Michelin star. The restaurant is the product of one of the most famous chefs in the world, Wolfgang Puck. He made his mark decades ago in LA by opening the legendary Spago, which he later moved to Beverly Hills. In fact, I've been lucky enough to have dined at the Beverly Hills Spago, where I had a wonderful meal. Needless to say, I was excited about trying Cut. I arrived at the establishment for an early dinner and was soon seated. In terms of design, I thought that the restaurant had a great look to it. It was cool and modern, but also elegant and comfortable. Next, I took in the menu, which was limited but focused. There was a solid offering of appetizers, but since I was going for a steak, I held off on getting a starter and went straight to the selection of beef. I thought that the restaurant showcased a nice variety of steak, not only in terms of cuts, but quality as well. There was certified Angus beef, American and Australian wagyu, and the pinnacle of steak, A5 Japanese wagyu. However, none of it comes cheap, as a mere 6-ounce Australian wagyu filet mignon will set one back $120, while 6 ounces of A5 sirloin goes for $225. There were also a few non-steak courses along with a decent number of sides. Next, I explored the beverage offerings. Cut has a solid selection of bottles, but I was after wine by the glass. I ended up getting a glass of the 2022 Routstock Pinot Noir from the Sonoma Coast. I found the wine to be very pleasant. It had a wonderful brightness and acidity to it with glossy tannins. It also proved to pair nicely with most of the food that I was about to eat. First up was a sort of amuse-bouche, a pair of gougères, which are basically fancy French cheese puffs. I found the little bites to be incredibly enjoyable. They were perfectly baked and had the right amount of cheese flavor. I thought that it was a nice touch that Cut provided an amuse. It's not something that most steakhouses do. Next up was the bread. Of course, bread is commonly served at the majority of steak-focused restaurants, but once again, Cut takes its bread to another level. 2 types of bread were served, along with butter and olive oil. First, I tried the pretzel roll with a touch of olive oil, and it was delicious. The pretzel was warm and fresh, and frankly it didn't need anything added to it. Next, I tried the focaccia, which actually proved to be my favorite between the two offerings. It had a remarkable crisp and flavorful exterior with a nice fluffy body. That was definitely one of the best complimentary bread courses that I've ever had at a steakhouse. While I obviously go to steak-focused establishments first and foremost for the steak, the extra care and effort that went into the bread course at Cut was much appreciated, and it certainly added to my overall experience at the restaurant. Soon enough, however, came the moment that I was waiting for. I was presented with my steak and side, and they looked great. I decided to order the 14-ounce certified Angus ribeye steak. Visually, it was clear that the cut of beef was well seared and well seasoned, and I couldn't wait to give it a go. To put it simply, that steak was amazing. It was the medicine I needed to alleviate the stress that I've been facing. First off, the meat was cooked to a perfect medium rare, and it was nice and juicy. As I thought from its appearance, it proved to be seasoned to perfection, and the flavors from the steak sear were remarkable. The beef was also very tender and yielded to my fork and knife with ease. The flavor of the ribeye was great, but I've certainly had stronger and more impactful cuts of beef from other steakhouses. However, like I said, it was seasoned perfectly, and that helped make up for it. Plus, an interesting feature of Cut is that the steak sauces are offered free of charge. While a number of establishments will pair their steaks with the standard house steak sauce, the other options usually come with an extra cost. Now, I typically prefer to enjoy my steak as it is, but if something is included, then I'm of course going to give it a try. I ended up choosing the Armagnac peppercorn sauce, which I thought was a fine choice. The sauce had a great taste, which didn't distract from the flavor of the beef, but rather it complemented it. The sauce seemed to take after an au poivre, which is actually one of my favorite sauces to pair with steak. Overall, that was a delicious ribeye, but it didn't come cheap as it had a price tag of $85. In fact, that steak is actually the second most affordable on the menu. Cut is an expensive place, but I was thoroughly satisfied with that steak. Thankfully, I can also say the same thing for my side. I ordered the Kung Pao cauliflower, which consisted of chilies, scallions, and peanuts. At first, I was a bit hesitant with regards to that side. It sounded like it could have been spicy, and I didn't want anything that would overwhelm my palate while I was eating steak. Still, I wanted to try something that was a bit different from the typical steakhouse offering, so I took a risk and it paid off. The cauliflower was excellent. To me, the flavors felt nicely balanced and had the right amount of heat. Now, if I were to consume that dish by itself, I wouldn't have minded a bit more spice, but combined with the steak, I felt that the level of heat was spot on. Texturally, I found the cauliflower to be tender and pleasant. All in all, I really enjoyed that side. It was somewhat spicy, but also sweet and just plain delicious. Plus, I also appreciated the fact that it was a more original side dish than what's often provided at the typical steakhouse. Between my steak and side, I was satisfied, but of course, I saved room for dessert. Cut's dessert menu featured an intriguing array of dishes. Honestly, it was tough to decide. Everything sounded so good. Ultimately, I went with the lemon coconut baked Alaska, which contained toasted meringue and an elderflower gelée. Visually, the dish was beautiful. That had to have been the most impressive looking baked Alaska that I've ever had. Although I wouldn't have minded if it was flambéed tableside, nevertheless, I was eager to give it a try. That dessert didn't disappoint. I loved it. It was cool and refreshing with a pleasing undertone of acidity. Texturally, it was nice, but not perfect. With so many different elements and layers, a baked Alaska in general can be a tricky concoction to get right. Regardless, I thought that dessert was very satisfying, and I was certainly happy with my choice. However, that wasn't the only treat that I would be enjoying that evening. It was my birthday after all, and the restaurant generously provided me with a chocolate lava cake with a lighted candle to mark the occasion. After making a wish and blowing out the candle, I took a bite of my second dessert, and suddenly getting older didn't feel so bad as that dish was delicious. It was pretty much a textbook example of a chocolate lava cake. The cake itself was nice and moist, and the runny molten chocolate core was on point. Plus, with the rich whipped cream on the side, you can't go wrong. To sum things up, I had a great time at Cut. It was just what I needed. Before I set foot in the restaurant, I was no doubt stressed. I was worried about money, finding that new apartment, and juggling all the responsibilities that I normally have to deal with. When that call came in about my reservation being canceled at 1 White Street, what was meant to be the one saving grace of an otherwise horrible week, I felt defeated. Thankfully, Cut was there for me, and good food can truly do wonders for the body and soul. Well, maybe not so much the body, as that wasn't the healthiest meal, and eating like that every night could seriously limit the amount of birthdays I'll be able to celebrate in the future. Anyway, I may have problems, but it's never so bad because there's always that next meal to look forward to, and my meal at Cut was a fine one indeed. After finishing, it was time for the bill, but as I received it, a manager came to my table and informed me that he took off the cost of my wine and dessert since it was my birthday, which was unnecessary, but incredibly nice and much appreciated. As a result, my bill was less than I thought it would be. It totaled to $113.23, but with my tip, I spent a bit over $143. It wasn't the birthday meal that I expected to have, but I got exactly what I wanted. Good food.
It's a beautiful day today here in New York City. Right now I'm at Madison Square Park, and it's been a few days since I had my excellent dinner at Cut Steakhouse. Now, I've got to be honest, I do wish my dinner at 1 White Street would have worked out. I mean, that's what I was in the mood for, that's what I was looking forward to, but at the end of the day, I still had great food, and that's what counts. Besides, things like electrical issues and stuff that would cause a restaurant to close, they happen. In fact, it happened to me before in Buenos Aires at Meshuggah. The first time I went there, the entire block was out of power, and yeah, that wasn't good. But I did go back a few days later and had an amazing meal, which is exactly what I'll be doing with 1 White Street. But getting back to Cut, I really liked it. I think it's a real top-tier steakhouse. I was very impressed with their menu, especially in regards to some of their top-tier cuts. I mean, that was impressive. I wish I could have tried some of those options, but I did have one of the more quote-unquote affordable steaks, which I still really enjoyed. However, I've got to say, if you're not after the fancy wagyu sort of cuts, then I do think other steakhouses like Keen's and Gallagher's offer far more bang for your buck. Still, I loved my steak, but I've also got to say that there were elements of Cut that I particularly appreciated. For one thing, that bread course was excellent. It seems like there are so many steakhouses out there that offer bread, but more so as an obligation rather than putting out something that's actually tasty. Of course, I'm not going to a steakhouse just to eat bread, but if it's placed in front of me, it's nice if it tastes really good. I also really like how the restaurant just doesn't stick to the pure steakhouse classics, but puts a number of new and interesting dishes on their menu. For instance, my Kung Pao cauliflower. That's definitely not the norm when it comes to steakhouse sides, but I loved it. Plus, their dessert menu had some good options as well. In regards to the service, it deserves top marks. Now, I was having a terrible week, and my birthday wasn't off to the best start. But when I got into that restaurant, I felt so much better, and that's partly due to the excellent service. To sum it up, I had a great birthday dinner. It wasn't where I expected I'd have it, but it was great nevertheless. In conclusion, I really enjoyed Cut, and I will definitely be returning.